Hello, 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 ladies. I hope you are doing well. It is Thursday, and today's a little mini episode, so I'm going to keep it short and sweet, and I'm going to try and do a little bit more of these, just because, number one, I've been getting quite busy, and number two, I know you're quite busy, so I wanted to do some shorter little trainings for those of you who want to get some snippets of information, but don't necessarily have time for like my more comprehensive workshops. Today, we are talking specifically about resistant starch. And I'm going to talk about what it is. I'm going to talk about why you should think of consider adding it to your diet. Some of you probably are already adding some of it to your diet, and just explain sort of like why it can be so beneficial for your overall health, as well as for the women in the group that are working towards weight loss, sort of like the role that it has within with regards to not only like sort of stoking or optimizing your metabolism, but also just giving you the ability to stay on track with your diet. So we're going to talk about all of that today. And before I get going, as per usual, I am going to ask you to let me know if you are here. If you can put a live in the comments and just say hello to me. Tell me where you're joining from. If you are catching this on a replay, if you could just put a replay in the comments. The reason I ask women to do this is so that Facebook knows that this is a topic that is of interest to you, and therefore it sends it out to the other women in this group, because the way Facebook works is you're not necessarily seeing all of the posts that I'm putting up. And so it just really helps me out if you can do that for me. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just quickly jumping on to the group so that I can say hello to those of you who are here. Hi, Jackie. Nice to see ya. And then if you do have any questions, I'll be able to see that too. So I'm just going to turn that down here. But this is the best way for me to see. Hello, Carol. Hi, Michelle. Nice to see you. Okay, so we're going to be talking about resistant starch. And so what we're kind of talking about today is we're diving a little bit into gut health, and we're talking a little bit about the microbiome, which is sort of like all of the, not only the good bacteria, but the bad bacteria in your large intestine and in your small intestine. And these little bugs have way more control over you than you may think. They have a big impact on your mood, on your hormones, on your metabolism, on your appetite. These tiny little bugs sitting in your digestive system right now. Some people think that they really have, that they are the masters that control what humans do because they have that much power on us. But anyways, what we're going to be talking about today, or what I want to start by saying, is that if your diet does not contain certain foods that feed your microbiome, you can end up feeling hungry all of the time. You can end up craving sugar. You can end up feeling depressed. You can end up having wonky hormones. They are that important. And so what we're going to be talking about today is one simple thing, or one simple type of food that you can add to your diet in order to selectively feed the good bacteria in your gut. We have good bacteria, we have bad bacteria. And what we want overall is we want lots of the good stuff, and we want to minimize the bad bacteria. Okay, so what we're talking about once again is resistant starch. So resistant starch, and again, I'm going to go through this quickly. I'm not doing a comprehensive deep dive today, but resistant starch, think of it as a type of carbohydrate that, as the name suggests, resists digestion. Okay, so you eat this type of starch, and it goes like through your stomach into your small intestine. Usually this, by the time carbohydrates reach our small intestine, usually what happens is they've been broken down into simple sugars, and they get absorbed into our bloodstream. And when they get absorbed into our bloodstream, they elevate our blood glucose levels and they trigger insulin. Now, resistant starch is very different because it does not get broken down. Therefore, when it goes through the small intestine, it doesn't get absorbed into the bloodstream, and it just keeps moving its way through your digestive system until it gets to your large intestine. Okay, so why would that, you might be like, well, that doesn't sound great. Like, if you're not digesting it, that can't be great for your gut health. Well, it actually is. And it's also good for just general health. And we'll kind of dive into it. Number one, it reduces insulin resistance, which, as you know, if you've been following me for a while, it is the number one hormone that I believe women in perimenopause and menopause need to support and need to control, because as estrogen levels decline, insulin resistance goes up. That's why so many women post-menopause develop type 2 diabetes. So anything that we can add to our toolbox to improve insulin sensitivity and reduce insulin resistance is going to be a good thing. So how does it reduce it? So if you think about it, once again, as this type of starch moves through our digestive system, it doesn't get broken down. It does not go into the bloodstream, and therefore it does not elevate blood glucose, and it does not elevate insulin. So it's kind of like one of those carbohydrates. Like, most carbohydrates are going to have a much bigger impact on your insulin as opposed to protein and fats. But this is one of those carbs where you can eat it and still have a lesser effect on your insulin, which is pretty cool. The other thing when it comes to just weight loss in general and weight management is that, once again, it is like any other fiber, right? It is going to keep you satiated. That is, you guys have heard me say this before. If you've been following me, my trifecta is protein, fat, and fiber, right? Making sure that all of your meals have protein, fat, and fiber. And this is one of those fibers that's really going to help with just keeping you satiated, giving you like control over your appetite, reducing those cravings. But that is just a little snippet of what resistant starch can do, because its effects on the body go way beyond what it does for weight loss. So let's talk a little bit about what happens once resistant starch, undigested, has made its way all the way to your large intestine. So this is where the magic happens. So what happens is that this resistant starch becomes food for the bacteria in your gut. And we're going to be talking about bacteria in the next couple of weeks and why it is so important for your overall health. But just understand that we want good bacteria. And you've heard of probiotics, right? Probiotics is when you intentionally add bacteria into your gut by either taking a probiotic or fermented foods like sauerkraut. Resistant starch is a prebiotic. It doesn't add bacteria, it feeds bacteria, and it allows them to multiply. So it's a really important element of developing a good microbiome. Now, what happens is that as your little bugs start to chomp down on resistant starch, the food will ferment. And in that fermentation process, your body starts to create something called butyrate. Butyrate is another phenomenal thing that we want more of in our life. It is a short chain fatty acid that has a multitude of health benefits. So many that I had to list them off on a piece of paper. So let me just explain sort of some of the benefits. So number one, understand that butyrate it's actually a source of energy for the cells in your large intestine. It is also anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer, specifically colon cancer, but generally anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer. Let me just look through my list here. Also really important for just increasing the absorption of nutrients in your diet. And as we were kind of talking about before, it has a really big role in optimizing your metabolism and reducing your risk of obesity and of type 2 diabetes. It reduces the risk of heart disease, reduces symptoms of depression and anxiety. It is a natural appetite suppression. This is all butyrate, right? So helping to regulate body weight, helping with sugar cravings. It helps to regulate bowel movements if you are constipated. I know a lot of women suffer with constipation, and it helps to improve sleep. Hello. So lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of different health benefits. So that is the science. I'm done with the science. We're going to go right into the practical, because I am trying to keep this to 20 minutes today, ladies. So let's talk about sources of resistant starch. Now, you may already be adding some sources into your diet, which is fantastic. I'm going to cover all of the different sources, and then I'm going to dive specifically for my low carb women out there, which, as you know, that's my preference for women our age. We're going to talk about how you can add more in if you are on a low carb diet, because yes, it is a carbohydrate, right? Okay. Okay. So let's talk about different sources. So it is a type of carbohydrate that resists digestion. Some of the different sources will be legumes, right? Beans and legumes, lentils, peas, all of those are going to be a great source of resistant starch, as are some whole grains, not all of them, but some of them, like oats, barley, brown rice, wheat bran, they're all really good. Another great source are potatoes and white rice. These are two foods that people like, especially like in the low carb world, or maybe you grew up or in the diet industry, you've been told, don't eat white potatoes, they're bad for you, or don't eat white rice. On the contrary, these are two of the best sources of resistant starch. And here's the trick. And I'm gonna teach you about this again later. But what you have to do with potatoes and rice is you have to cook it, and then you have to let it cool completely. And what happens is when it cools completely, the starch turns into resistant starch. Then you can eat it. You can warm it up slightly. You don't want to warm it up completely. But when you let white potatoes and white rice cool and warm up, you now have resistant starch, and you can feed all that little good bacteria in your gut, and you can start to produce butyrate, okay? Other sources would be green bananas. So unripe green bananas, or also unripe green plantains. So as the fruit ripens, when the fruit is not ripe, it is resistant starch. As it ripens, it turns into more of a digestible starch. So again, if you want to get more of it, you can simply just buy green bananas and put those in your smoothie instead in the morning, instead of the regular ones. They will not be as sweet. There will not be as much sugar in it, which is a good thing, but you're going to get those beautiful resistant starches. You can also get them in root vegetables. Okay, so carrots, turnips, parsnips, those starchier root vegetables. Some tropical fruits, so green papaya, again, unripened green papaya. And you can also take it as a supplement. There are a lot of people that will simply supplement with various types of resistant starch to add it into their diet. Okay. Now, of that list that I just gave you, obviously, if you're on a low carb diet, a lot of these foods are a big no-no, right? Because if you're trying to keep your carbs, especially if you're on a keto approach and you're trying to keep your carbs under 50 grams, incorporating, bananas or papaya or plantain or rice or potatoes is like a big no-no, but there are some ways that you can do it. So let's talk specifically about adding resistant starch to low carb diets. So number one of the great ways that you can do this is, and one of the things that I like to do is I like to add resistant starch to my smoothies in the morning. Not a ton of it, just a little bit. So some of the ways that you can do this is you can actually buy green banana flour. You can buy raw potato starch or even raw plantain flour. And you literally put about a teaspoon into your smoothie, and you're literally putting resistant starch to go and feed those good bacteria so you can start to get that butyrate and all those beautiful effects. Now, just so you understand, again, if you're like, oh my God, I can't put carbs in my smoothie, I'm trying to keep under 20 grams or whatever it may be, it is resistant to digestion. So even though you are putting carbs into your smoothie, you don't count them. It's kind of like fiber. You just don't count it. It's like, if you're doing keto, you know what net carbs is. Just don't count them. They don't count, okay? What I would recommend is if you're going to use this as a way of incorporating more, start with 1 teaspoon and slowly add more, because what can happen is that if your poor little gut bacteria are starving and you suddenly start giving them all this resistant starch and they start gorging and fermenting and doing all of this stuff, well, fermentation what does that produce? It produces a lot of gas. So you could end up with a very gassy situation and feeling very bloated, which no woman wants to feel. So start slow, and then you can slowly incorporate more of it, okay? The other way that you can incorporate more resistant starch is carb cycling. So inside my program, Perimenopause Body Solutions, what I teach women is about carb cycling. And when they cycle carbs, they are cycling smart carbs. Everything I just told you about, the root veggies, the potatoes, the white rice, the fruit, beans and legumes if they can tolerate them, right? So all of these things, we strategically add them in throughout our week, or throughout most of the program. We start to learn how to reincorporate them. And this is one of the benefits of carb cycling, is that we have this opportunity to add in these resistant starches and to feed the bacteria in our gut. Because if you go too low carb for too long, you're starving your gut bacteria. They need food, and they will not be happy if you don't give them food, okay? Now, I'm going to end up with one last little recipe for you guys. So this is how to make low carb rice, and it is regular rice, but it becomes low carb because we're going to let it cool. We're going to let it develop that resistant starch. And therefore, when we eat it, we're not absorbing all of the sugar and the calories from the rice. So what you want to do, and this is a trick that has been, by the way, this is scientifically proven. You can start Googling it if you want, but what you're going to do is you're going to cook your rice with coconut oil. The acid in the coconut oil does something with the rice. I can't explain it to you. I just know it happens, where it just like it like supercharges the resistance starch. Think of it that way. Okay, so you're going to cook your rice with your coconut oil. I've seen different recipes. You could probably start with like 1 cup of rice, 1 tablespoon of coconut oil. If you're already on a low carb, moderate fat, or high fat diet, you could even put more. I love putting fat in my rice. It's always amazing. You're going to cook it as usual, but then the trick is you've got to let it cool all the way down. Okay, that is the trick. That's how you're going to convert the rice, the simple sugars in the rice, into resistant starch. Then you can slightly reheat and add it to your diet and not worry so much about the carbohydrate intake. So that is it for today. How'd I do? 3:17. I kept it to 17 minutes. Woohoo! Not bad. All right, that's it for today. I want to start doing these little snippets. Let me know if you enjoyed this. If it was helpful, let me know. Super quick, I do have a Mother's Day promo right now. If you haven't seen it, I am giving women $500 off my personal coaching program. All you need to do is book an initial consult with me before, book it before end of next week, and I will give you $500 off. So this is a very short promo, then it goes back to the regular price. So if you've been thinking about personal coaching, if you need help with figuring out your hormones, your metabolism, your diet, your macros, all that good stuff, book a call. There is no pressure. If it's not for you, I will send you on your way with some kind of free resource. But that's it for today. Woohoo! 3:18. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful Mother's Day weekend. And I will see you all again very shortly. Bye.